Cry is the leader of the world's strongest clan, Strange Grief, and is widely respected for his wisdom and power. However, in reality, he is extremely weak and just wants to find a way to abandon his position. We see Cry standing in line at a treasure hunter's clan meeting, clearly not wanting to be there, but he has no choice. In this world, treasure hunters are basically celebrities as they explore treasure chests around the globe facing ghosts, all without any health insurance. It's a very dangerous job, but the promise of fame and fortune motivates dozens of people to become treasure hunters every year. To do this, they often join a clan like First Step, for example, which is widely known in the capital as one of the best of all time. It is made up of teams that join together to help each other. The reason so many people are present to join is that unless you're called Jinwoo, there's a limit to how far you can go as a solo hunter. Cry was trying to stay unnoticed, but suddenly a girl behind him starts talking and asks if he's there to join a team as well. Cry tries the old tactic of ignoring her until she goes away, but before he realizes it, she's already in front of him introducing herself. Her name is Ruda and she's a level 3 hunter. She extends her hand to Cry, but he refuses to shake it, though he does say his name. She's disappointed that Cry didn't shake her hand, but she quickly gets over it and starts talking more about herself. She had been hunting alone until now, but she found a vault called White Wolf's Den and couldn't handle it by herself, so she decided to come and join a team. At this point, the man in front of them turns around and asks if Ruda should really be trying to take on such dangerous vaults like White Wolf's Den while she's still at level 3. He smirks in disdain and calls her an inexperienced amateur, since even at level 3 she's still basically a beginner compared to the other professional hunters. As the argument heats up, Ruda gets really angry and Cry wishes he had stayed home to avoid getting involved with them. Ruda pulls out her knives and is about to attack the man, but before she can do anything, a guard approaches and reminds Ruda if she continues, she'll be banned from the clan meeting. She realizes she lost her temper for a moment, so she puts her knives away and apologizes for the incident, while Cry tries to act as if he wasn't there. A little later, Cry finally enters the clan meeting and Ruda is still with him since he's the only person she knows there. She's impressed by all the powerful hunters around and feels a bit overwhelmed since she's never been in a place like this before. She asks Cry if he's been there before and he responds that this is his 5th time. Ruda then thinks he must be a terrible hunter if he has to keep coming back to the recruitment meeting. After all, talent is everything among hunters, so even a nobody can make a name for themselves and rise through the ranks. Ruda notices a group of people in flashy outfits across the room and asks Cry about them. He informs her that group is called Brave, and of all the groups recruiting today, they are undeniably the strongest. As a group, they managed to complete a level 7 vault with only 6 members, so they are widely respected. If you get recruited by their leader Rodan, you practically have a guaranteed hunting career, though he is very picky about his selection criteria. Ruda is intrigued and asks about the empty table in the corner of the room, but before Cry can say anything, the guy from before shows up and says he'll explain everything. Ruda doesn't want help from him after the previous argument, but Greg keeps explaining anyway and says the table belongs to the group that founded this clan Stragri. The group was made up of talented youths who arrived in the capital a few years ago and became known as Strange Grief. However, what others don't know is that the legendary group is made up of Cry's childhood friends. Apparently, there were rumors that Strange Grief would be recruiting today, but since their spot is empty, Greg assumes the rumors were false. At this point, a boy who came to apply for Strange Grief realizes they haven't arrived yet and gets furious because he believes he'll become the strongest hunter in the world someday, and the only group worthy of joining is that one. Greg finds the boy amusing, but Ruda doesn't have the courage to say anything since the boy is a higher level than her. At this moment, a girl named Tino approaches, ready to shut the red-haired boy up with violence because she believes she's the only one who deserves to enter Stragri. Tino's partner tries to calm her down, saying it's not worth causing a scene even if the red-haired boy is being really annoying. For a moment it seemed like they had calmed down enough to avoid a fight, but then Greg jumps in with his top-notch provocation and suddenly the whole room is fueling the fire. With the brawl now inevitable, Tino and the boy get ready to face off. Cry realizes things are about to get chaotic and doesn't want to be around when that happens, so he asks Ruda to leave with him. When the fight is about to start and Tino is ready to kill the boy just because of his arrogance, she suddenly senses a familiar presence nearby. The second she spots Cry, she forgets all about the fight and runs straight to him. Cry is caught off guard by the sudden attack, stumbles backward, and Tino nervously calls him Master and asks if he saw her losing her temper. Ark also approaches and greets Cry as he had been waiting for his arrival. They couldn't start the clan meeting without Cry anyway, since he's the master of the clan and the leader of Stragri. Everyone who didn't already recognize him is shocked to learn this, as it means Cry is the most important person there. However, all the attention he's getting makes him feel sick and he really just wants to go home. We then get a flashback from a few years ago when Cry and his childhood friends arrived in the capital. They were clearing out all the beginner vaults in record time, but there was just one problem. Cry had no idea what he was doing. He was saved from a monster, and his companions thought he was deliberately lowering his guard to act as bait, so he went along with the plan, but he was about to be devoured. They all shared the same dream of becoming exceptional hunters, but unlike the other 5, Cry was exceptionally ordinary. He knew that sooner or later he would become a burden to the group and didn't want his friends to hate him for his weakness, so he made the decision to leave the group on his own. However, when he tried to leave, fate just laughed in his face, and in the end he was named the group's leader. That's how he arrived at his current position as the leader of his truly talented childhood friends, but he really wishes he could retire from being a hunter. Ruda and Greg still can't believe they had been talking to the clan master the whole time, and while Cry is sitting in his chair, Ark approaches and asks if he arrived late on purpose to observe the crowd like one of the commoners. Cry denies it and says he just overslept, but Ark doesn't believe him and is convinced Cry was late on purpose. For some reason, no matter how hard Cry tries to explain himself, people always interpret him in a way that makes him seem better than he really is. Tino doesn't like how close Ark is to Cry, so she wants to kick him out of the clan, but Cry won't do that. Tino is a level 4 hunter who is also an apprentice to one of Cry's childhood friends named Liz, so she spends a lot of time with him. Ark asks Cry if he has any good candidates in mind for recruitment, but honestly, there's no need to add new members to the clan at the moment. However, since Ark almost never recruits new members, Cry takes the opportunity and asks if Ark would seriously consider any recommendation he makes. Ark says he'll accept anyone Cray chooses, which surprises everyone, so the vice captain tries to dissuade him from making such a hasty decision. However, Ark interrupts her and says that anyone Cry chooses will be worthy of joining his group. Tino starts blushing because she thinks Cry is considering recommending her, but she also doesn't like Ark, so she's a bit torn about whether to accept or not. Suddenly, the boy from before, whose name is Gilbert, steps forward in front of the crowd, completely ready to beg if necessary to be accepted by Cry. Cry tries to think if Gilbert would be a good choice or not, but quickly gives up since he's terrible at judging people's character. He has no idea how to tell if someone will become strong in the future, so he decides to leave it to luck. He tells Gilbert that he's willing to recommend him, but there's one condition before that. As a hunter, the most important thing is to ensure you always win, and if you don't have strength, you'll end up putting your team members in danger, so Cry wants him to prove he has the ability to always win. Also, ever since Cry started his career as a hunter, he has never lost, though that's because he's never actually been in a real fight. Either way, Cry pulls out one of his artifact rings and announces to all the hunters there that the first person to present the ring to Ark will be accepted into his group, and with that, he tosses the ring into the air to watch the circus unfold. The first person to grab the ring is Gilbert, but that doesn't last long, as not even a second passes before Tino leaps onto him and knees him in the face so hard that he's sent flying to the other side of the room. Gilbert probably needs a doctor now, but no one is focusing on him at the moment because the ring is rolling across the floor, and while everyone hesitates initially, it doesn't take long for everyone to start fighting over it. At this point, Cry decides to leave, and even though the bar is being destroyed as he leaves, he says it's not his problem and heads home. However, the next morning, the problem becomes his as the bar fight makes headline news. Apparently, the entire place was destroyed because of the fight, but luckily there were no civilian casualties in the end. However, as a result of the events, Eva informs him that the Explorers Association wants a meeting with him, and Cry already knows that means he's in deep trouble. He asks how Ark reacted to the news, and Eva says he actually took it as a joke and laughed about the situation. Since Ark probably isn't mad, Cry wants to take advantage of his good mood and send him the bill to rebuild the bar, in addition to asking him to go deal with the meeting with the association, but Eva informs him that the meeting is specifically for him, so there's no way he can escape this time. Even if he tries to ignore it, Gark, the association manager, will hunt him down as he always does, so Cry gives in and agrees to go, but he'll use his secret weapon to resolve it as quickly as possible, and that secret weapon is kneeling and apologizing. He also argues that the only damage was to the bar, and since no one was hurt and the bar owner was compensated for the repairs, there shouldn't be any more issues. Gark didn't even have the chance to yell at Cry yet, but after seeing Cry apologize, he lets it go for now. However, even though there are no official complaints against him, Cry still needs to take responsibility for his actions, which is why Gark assigns him a mission and he has no right to refuse it. The association receives all sorts of missions for hunters, but with such a large volume, there are always missions that are either too difficult or pay so little that no one wants to do them. These missions are what hunters call chores, and Cry really doesn't want to have to deal with one of those, so he tries to pretend he's too important to be tasked with a chore. However, Gark isn't letting him off the hook, so he's forced to pick one. Cry opens the mission book and starts looking for the easiest one, and out of all the available missions, the lowest level is 3, so he chooses that. He planned to just throw the job at Ark, but when he goes to find him, he's informed by Tino that Ark is in a meeting with some nobles. He'll be gone for a while, and no one else is around, so Cry doesn't have many options to get rid of his job. At that moment, he notices that Tino is wearing his ring, which means she was the winner of his little game the previous day, but setting that aside, he asks if she's available at the moment. Tino gets all excited because she thinks he's about to ask her out on a date, but to her dismay, he says he has a mission for her. She immediately tries to run away, but even though she's fast, Cry has his ways to catch up to her. He summons Silver the Wolf Chain and instructs it to capture Tino, and soon enough, Cry has her tied to a chair to discuss the mission with her. She feels betrayed because she just wanted to go on a date with Cry, but now he's forcing her to do this horrible mission on her own. Cry asks if the problem is that she doesn't want to do it alone, and Tino responds that she wouldn't mind the idea if Cry went with her. However, that would mean Cry would have to do actual work, so he opts to send Tino on the mission with a group of hunters he met yesterday. Rewinding 6 years, the most powerful clan of a region, then unnamed, arrives at the Adventurers Association to register their group. As usual, Cry tries to dissuade the team from moving forward and doesn't even want to enter. But his companions are unwilling to give up at this point. Lacking any confidence, he claims he'll only hold the team back, but his friends insist he leads them, no matter the cost, and declare it's no longer up for discussion. Since Cry is stalling, the hothead of the group barges in, kicking the door open with all the attitude in the world and introducing himself as Luke Cycle, the best swordsman in the world. Beside him, Liz Smart tells Luke not to hog the spotlight and humbly presents herself as the best thief in the universe. Luke then explains to a bystander that he's the greatest of them all because, as Cry always says, truly strong people don't choose their weapon. Since Luke wields a wooden sword, it's obvious he's the most dangerous. Left without a place to hide, Cry only wants the fiery delinquent to stop talking about him that way. Nevertheless, it's time for the boy to register the clan's name and symbol. So the receptionist hands him a piece of paper, explaining that a team's name represents its spirit. Since the youths hadn't thought about that detail, Cry had to make something up on the spot. In his mind, it was the perfect chance to choose a terrible name so they would remove him as leader. Thus, he scribbled a strange design resembling a skull and named the group Strange Grief. Everyone in the group found the name awful, so Cry used it as evidence of his lack of leadership skill. But, as soon as he threatened to step down, all his friends reversed their opinions and adopted the name as if it were the most genius idea ever. And that's how the Strange Clan was born. And wow, this guy has an incredible talent for not escaping tough situations. Jumping to the present, Greg is speechless upon discovering that the skinny, sickly-looking guy is actually the master of the Pagadas clan, the man known as Thousand Tricks. Upon hearing the name, Cry reflects that this was the second title he received as leader of Stragri, since renowned treasure hunters usually earn special names from the association and become idols. Despite everyone's insistence, Gilbert refuses to believe that this guy is as amazing as they say. Tino, who loathes the fiery-haired man with a passion, starts complaining to her boss that she can't work with him because she hates people who just talk and are worthless. Cry, hearing these words, thinks she described him perfectly and blames his colleagues, who spread the rumors about him being the strongest, for all these lies. At any rate, Cry wants to know if the guests are ready for the mission, and Gilbert is the first to respond, calling it all a joke and saying it's an insult that someone so useless is at level 8. Greg tries to warn him that he's provoking the wrong person, but the swordsman doesn't care what others say. Cry simply kicks Gilbert out of the mission. With that settled, he asks Greg and Ruda if they're in, and they confirm. Furious, Gilbert expects the Master of Strange to beg for his approval, but Cry couldn't care less about his refusal. And wow, Cry just earned 200% in my protagonist book for simply expelling this annoying guy from the team. Cry then asks Tino if she needs anything, and she takes the opportunity to say yes, she needs the master. He makes it clear that's not happening. With everything resolved, Cry prepares to leave, but Gilbert challenges him and mentions that if he loses, he'll join the group. Cry tells him Tino is the leader, so she'll be the one he faces. Tino, never holding back, declares she'll deliver divine punishment to Gilbert using the incredible reach she developed through rigorous training, and I'm rooting hard for her, confident. The swordsman promises not to hold back and challenges Cry again as soon as he's done defeating her. Obviously, fighting is the last thing Cry wants. But Tino captures the challenger's attention, warning him that, although she's also level 4, she's still nothing compared to the master. She then says that, to avoid killing him, she'll fight unarmed and that just her body will be enough to destroy him. Cry thinks that Tino should handle this arrogant guy easily, and his only worry in this fight is the so-called Purgatory Blade, as this relic could become quite a challenge in the hands of someone skilled. Surprisingly, Gilbert follows Tino's lead and drops his weapon as well. Tino then says that after crushing this guy, she'll get ice cream with the master. But Cry doesn't seem thrilled about the idea. The rogue sulks to get her way, and the boss gives in just to keep the peace. Motivated, Tino now has the perfect excuse to fight like it's her last day. And with that in mind, she rushes Gilbert with surprising speed. Gilbert barely dodges the first blow, but there's nothing he can do against the following kick. Taking his first beating of the day, and I hope it's not the last. Determined, he doesn't give up and counters the girl, but she dodges easily and mocks him for challenging her master. Although he seems entirely beaten, Gilbert turns things around and regains control of his body. Then, Tino smacks him on the neck, finishing the poor man, or so everyone thought, because while the others already considered him defeated, well, folks, he resorts to the divine power found in anime, that is, the flashback of determination. So here we go. Since childhood, he outshone some adults in swordplay, and it wasn't long before he grew up and moved to the capital to pursue his dream career. He formed a group and sold several treasure chests, and this success gave him a feeling of invincibility. Now, faced with the current situation, he returns to reality as his rival calls out to him. She says he should use his sword if he wants any chance of surviving. Gilbert refuses, but she warns him that pride means nothing when you're dead. Willing or not, the swordsman agrees, though he can't accept being weaker than his opponent. Cry intervenes, telling Gilbert they're a lot alike. Just as Gilbert left his last group due to a gap in strength, Cry went through a similar situation. However, in Cry's case, no one was left behind. Rather, they didn't leave him, no matter how much he wanted, but obviously, Cry doesn't say this aloud. Hearing this, Gilbert is struck by the idea that Cry is benevolent, even as he leads the most feared clan in the capital. He then starts seeing Thousand Tricks as a kind of entity, and I already think our protagonist is some sort of charmer. This can't be real. Meanwhile, Cry approaches the defeated man's sword, identifying its elemental damage and enhanced attack range, and comments it's a simple yet good weapon, so the swordsman should take good care of it. But things start getting weird here, as after Gilbert realizes Cry activated his sword far better than he ever could, reaching a flame he'd never achieved even after wielding the blade for years. Gilbert yells that this is simply impossible and calls the Stragri leader a monster. And I'm starting to suspect that this guy isn't weak and just unaware of his true power. Moving on, Cry explains that mana material is considered the world's fundamental substance. But, though it's everywhere, it can't be seen by the naked eye. Treasure chests are a phenomenon where spiritual lines and other forces condense mana material, creating limited alternate worlds based on memories from the world's core. The rules governing this phenomenon are studied in many realms but remain not fully understood, and the White Wolf's Nest is one of those treasure chests. Originally inhabited by lupine monsters called Silvermoon, they were hunted to extinction for their pelts. Afterward, the chest appeared, along with a blood-stained ghost in the form of a wolf. Reading about this in the newspaper, Cry is a bit scared and points out that a treasure chest with a vengeful history is a bit too much. Ava argues that it was Cry himself who put the group in this situation, but he assures her that his team has the level needed to overcome the challenge. As the chest is level 3, they'll have 4 people, and Tino is joining. By the way, our protagonist thanks her for explaining why Gilbert left his old group, as he could use that information at the right moment. Moving forward, the clan's vice master mentions that the master put on quite a show with a relic in the training room. He replies that it was easy to control, especially since even Gilbert managed to use it a little, without any real knowledge. Speaking of which, Cry loves collecting relics of all kinds of powers and forms, mentioning he'd love to know if Gilbert would sell the Purgatory Blade. Hearing this, Ava loses her patience, pointing out that he already has several relics like that sword, and on top of that, he even borrowed from Citri due to debt, and even though he receives the same commission as all the other strange members, the clan doesn't generate endless money. Embarrassed, Cry tries to find a counter-argument, but can only remember that he needs someone to recharge his relics. So he approaches 2 allies, and while the woman recharges the relics, the man tells him that a blood-stained ghost wolf appeared near the White Wolf's Nest and destroyed an entire caravan with level 3 escorts. Cry thinks his team can handle it without issues, but the man insists that the ghosts in the area are getting stronger. The woman adds that Rudolph Devu, a powerful level 5 caster, also appeared there. And Cry recalls that this guy is on the wanted list for a guild job he accepted. Worried that the mission might fail, the leader hopes Gilbert at least recharge the Purgatory Blade. Speaking of the team already heading to the nest, Tino doesn't help the atmosphere by revealing she left a will before departing, figuring that if her master sent her on this mission, it wouldn't be easy. Even so, she believes Cry would never assign her a random group. On the other hand, all the other members, except Tino, think this is the most random team possible. At any rate, Gilbert accepted the job because Thousand Tricks even knew why he left his old group. And Tino explains that the guy is a deduction genius with extensive knowledge of the capital and its surroundings, so he must have deduced that from Gilbert's words. Ruda doubts this a lot, but Greg thinks only such a methodical mind could have coldly calculated the incident at the bar. Taking advantage of the speech, Tino reinforces that the master planned everything for the mission to go smoothly and would never send a group to their death without careful thought. And speaking of the devil, after sending a group to certain death without thinking, Cry decides to meet them in time to order the mission's cancellation. Back with the team, they barely arrive before encountering a ghost wielding a sword and shield at a level well above humans. Meanwhile, Cry is rummaging through endless chaos, looking for relics, and Eva scolds him for carrying a Citri slime, which is illegal under Imperial law. But the boy has no time to waste and will have to make do with it. With that, he flies off with a relic that basically turns him into Batman and soars away. While Eva mentions that the flying relic is the same from the human missile incident that sent someone packing. The relic, called Night Hiker, is basically uncontrollable. Years ago in the early days of Strange Grief, it had only been a week since the clan began operating in the capital of Zabrudia, and Luke was already furious because his supreme divine sword, which he had named the Blade of the Testament, had shattered like a twig. Other members full of envy joked that fighting ghosts with a stick would be difficult, while Tino commented that he didn't expect to find a Cyclops in a level 1 cave as those monsters were level 4. Overhearing the conversation, a drunken tavern patron approached the group calling the youths rookies, insisting that a Cyclops would never appear in the Goblin Cave, and even if it had, there was no way they could have survived. At that moment, 2 clan members approached the drunkard and showed him the Cyclops, leaving the adventurer stunned. Cry, reflecting on the scene, thought to himself that this was exactly why he didn't want to have brought the creature. Fast forward to the present, Gilbert slices a werewolf in half with his sword. Tired of the fight, Ruda complains that such a monster should never appear in a level 3 cave. Likewise, Greg doesn't understand why the Purgatory Blade didn't ignite during the battle, to which its owner explains that the sword was out of mana and he couldn't recharge it alone. Ruda begins to think that it might be better to retreat for now, and Greg adds that the situation is quite different from what they had been told, especially since under these circumstances, the group they came to rescue is probably already dead. After hearing everyone's opinion, the leader Tino decrees that the plan will not be changed. Anxious, Greg asks if survival shouldn't be the priority, but Tino firmly responds that they didn't come there to capture monsters and that those they came to rescue are still alive. In fact, they are executing a perfect level 8 strategy, and the decision to deplete the Purgatory Blade's mana was part of the Master's plan. The group moves toward the White Wolf's den, where humanoid wolves are armed with bows and firearms. This makes Greg realize that the ones they defeated earlier weren't just randomly strong, but the entire pack was highly skilled. Tino explains that this den was created to house the Silver Moon wolves who originally lived there. Gilbert advances eagerly to resolve the situation quickly, thinking that once they dealt with the wolves with bows and firearms, the rest would be easy. However, Tino warns him not to be reckless, reminding him that as a leader, it's his duty to ensure everyone returns alive, and with that she presents a clear strategy. She and Ruda, being the fastest, will lure the enemy while the rest will attack from behind, as at close range firearms shouldn't pose much of a problem. She reminds them that even if they find themselves in a dangerous situation, no one should use another as a shield or sacrifice. Meanwhile, Cry prays silently for Tino to at least survive, even if the rest of the group ends up being used as a shield. This guy is a comedy. Back with the team, Tino acknowledges that the enemy is far superior in terms of skill, but they have an advantage: teamwork. Because no matter how strong the opponent is, they do not understand the concept of cooperation. With that said, more armed werewolves appear and the group instinctively knows how to respond. Tino notes that although they are an improvised team, the formation is not bad. Gilbert may talk too much, but he is very competent. Greg, with his vast experience, works well with others. Ruda may not do anything flashy, but as a rogue, she excels at locating enemies, and without her, Tino wouldn't be able to focus on the fight. With all aspects of the strategy falling into place, Tino starts to believe that her master is a true genius for being so precise. Meanwhile, in the heat of battle, Gilbert grows irritated, feeling underestimated by the enemy. This feeling takes him back to an old memory where he thought he was going through the same thing when he ordered his subordinates to be more persistent, but his team couldn't keep up with his pace, so Gilbert gave up and left the group right there. Perhaps they were doing their best, but over time the gap between them only widened. At that time, the boy was full of anger, and only now does he realize that those people were giving their all and he never considered how they felt. Now, fighting side by side with others, he has reached a level of maturity where he understands that teamwork is always better. And after another victory, the team advances into the White Wolf's den, arriving at an area strangely larger than the previous ones. Tino places her hand on the wall and senses a presence that she is absolutely certain is not the people they came to rescue, but probably the den's boss. Greg asks if it wouldn't be wiser to flee, but Tino points out that they got there without a scratch, so they should be able to handle the boss. However, even with these somewhat assertive words, Greg remains uneasy. Tino comments that he is too cautious for someone who looks so tough, and that safe missions never help anyone grow, mentioning that caution is good, but sometimes one must be bold. Greg admits that she's not entirely wrong, as once a hunter reaches level 4, they can make a living just by completing caves below their level. Every time he thought he couldn't win, Greg stopped confronting the enemy, a direct result of seeing many of his friends die. Tino responds that although Greg has been a hunter for a long time, he came to the first step precisely to change that mindset, and that's also why the Master put him in the group. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense for Cry to have chosen someone he barely knew. In reality, Cry wanted to save everyone there, which means that the master is like a god, and there is no way he assembled that team randomly, as he would never lower himself to such a ridiculous role, and everything he does is calculated and must align perfectly with his infallible plan, which is always executed surgically through complex strategies. Friends, this is what I call unshakable faith. At that moment, Ruda is eager to understand why she was chosen for the team, and Tino is at a loss for how to respond, simply observing her while trying to find an answer. Soon she realizes the reason is obvious. Ruda is very beautiful. The rookie seems about to complain, but before she can, the leader interrupts the idle talk and calls the group to continue the journey. And speaking of the cold and calculating god, Cry begins to panic as he has no idea where the group he sent is, and to make matters worse, the artifact he's using to fly is basically a brakeless airplane, which is obviously dangerous. However, despite all the setbacks along the way, he manages to accidentally fall into the White Wolf's den, and meanwhile, Tino and the others face the dungeon boss, a giant white wolf. The moment the enemy makes its first move, the entire group retreats, clearly anxious, as there is no denying that this wolf is incredibly powerful. The team is hesitant, disorganized, and torn between fighting or fleeing. Tino notices that the boss isn't wearing a helmet, which must be its weak point, and this is probably one of the 1,000 challenges imposed by her master Cry, so she needs to ensure she passes the test. With that in mind, she orders Gilbert to block one of the wolf's blows while she handles the rest. Gilbert steps forward holding his sword against the crushing force of the beast's axe, resisting for a moment. Greg strikes one of the legs, but the wolf manages to throw the warrior away with its left front paw. Tino then advances fearlessly against the opponent, leaving Ruda in awe of her determination. Greg loses his sword after it suffers a heavy blow from the axe, shattering the blade. When the wolf prepares for a second strike, Ruda rushes to save him, pushing him just in time. Tino seizes the moment, climbing up the wolf's axe handle and heading toward its head. During the leap to deliver the final blow, she suffers a deep scratch but manages to follow through with her plan and stab her sword into the creature, defeating it once and for all. After the victory, Tino realizes her injury is quite serious, but she already has a healing potion ready, which eases the situation. Greg laments his broken sword, but Gilbert points out that he should be thankful it wasn't his head instead. Eventually, the big guy thanks Ruda for saving him, and they remember that there is still a rescue mission ahead. Tino hands her sword to Greg as he is unarmed, but at that moment a giant spear is hurled toward the leader, narrowly missing, impaling her. While they recover, 4 more giant white wolves begin to appear, identical to the one they thought was the dungeon boss. This time, even Tino feels the pressure and realizes that her master put them in a much tougher challenge than they expected. Facing this overwhelming situation, she orders everyone to flee through the nearest path to the right, knowing that the narrow corridor would hinder the wolves' movements. However, one of the wolves blocks the path, so Greg suggests that Tino and Ruda, being faster, escape through the passage while he and Gilbert sacrifice themselves for the group. But the leader insists that no one should be sacrificed, ordering each member to aim for the wolf's eyes and organizing the team for a new offensive. The attack formation quickly settles with Gilbert at the front, ready to face death head on. With his sword, he blocks one of the wolf's attacks, followed by Greg's blow, but both are thrown back. Ruda throws shurikens at another wolf's eyes, but the creature closes them in time. Tino then prepares to use a technique developed under Cry's training, using an accessory that emits a bright light to blind one of the wolves. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Gilbert attacks, but even blind, the wolf manages to hurl him against the wall with force. Tino scolds herself for a poor strategy that put a team member in danger, and now it seems everything is about to end. The group is surrounded and without resources to fight. At that moment, Cry accidentally arrives there, knocking down a wolf with his uncontrolled flight. The remaining wolves hesitate to attack after witnessing such power, but one advances with its sword. Cry, using one of his accessories, blocks the blow and fires projectiles with another, taking down the creature. With 17 safety rings at his disposal, Cry can do many things in battle, but he just wants to go home, not caring to find the people he was supposed to rescue. And to quickly end the situation, he throws his pendant into the air and detonates it with one of his rings, creating a distraction for the group to escape. Soon everyone is in retreat, although Tino is injured and slower than the others. Gilbert complains about the pace, but Ruda points out that it's the leader who is setting the pace because of the injured rogue. In reality, Cry is running as fast as he can, which happens to be as slow as the rogue, and thinking that the master is being considerate, Tino recalls that his kindness has always been one of his defining traits. She then remembers that a long time ago, when she was just a child, she was in trouble with 2 boys until strange grief appeared to save her. Since then, she has always wanted to be like them. After putting a good distance between them and the wolves, the group takes a break and Cry uses another artifact to heal Tino's wounds. Gilbert comments with some disdain that the guy uses an item for everything, but Cry doesn't care. They continue on their way under Cry's leadership, although he has no idea what he's doing, much less how to get out of that situation. A few years ago, when he was still a child, Cry always impressed his clanmates with the number of relics he collected. Being an obsessive fan of these items, he made a point to save money to buy as many as he could. Liz asked if Cry would choose one that suited her, but Luke thought it would be unfair, as the leader should choose a relic that supported the whole group. At that point, the black-haired girl mentioned that now it would be worth it for the leader to be a hoarder of these items, because that way she would finally be rewarded for acting as the battery for them, in the sense that she was the one who provided energy for the items to work. Then another girl in the group wanted to know what relic she had in her hands, so the owner explained that it was a magic bag capable of carrying far more items than one could imagine. The black-haired girl assumed the bag must have been expensive, but on the contrary, Cry explained that it was very cheap because it could only store chocolate. With that, the dark-haired girl realized there was nothing more useless than that. Liz caught the leader's attention by showing a bracelet she liked, but soon after was thrown to the ground twice without being able to react. Embarrassed, Cry explained that it was a labyrinth ring that messed with the spatial sense of its user. Meanwhile, Luke picked up a sword, mentioning it was cool, but Cry revealed it was cursed. Because of that, Luke was overcome with a mad desire to cut people. Fortunately, these dangerous relics were turned into training tools for Luke and Liz. Moving to the present, Cry's current group was walking through the narrow corridors of the White Wolf's den. Cry noticed that these corridors continuously split, meaning that no matter how much they walked, everything looked the same and there was no way of knowing where they were. To make matters worse, for some reason, Cry was leading the way as if he could guide the team, even with Tino and Ruda in the group, who could do that job much better than he could. At that moment, Cry discreetly looked back, causing everyone else to do the same. In fact, he just wanted to see if Tino would look at him, as he was worried she already hated him for dragging her into this suicide mission. But since she looked along with the others, he started to think she didn't want to talk to him anymore, and all kinds of anxiety filled his mind. Although she always said she adored him, it seemed Cry had made a huge mistake and thought he would have to apologize on his knees. At that, Gilbert asked if they were heading towards the exit, which made Cry look back again, dragging everyone into the same motion. Internally, the leader reflected that, of course, they were heading towards the exit, but he simply didn't know the way. Tino informed the swordsman that figuring out the master's plan was part of the training and revealed they had never been walking towards the exit. This time, even Cry was surprised, so she added that she had checked the map before they left and had some notion of the cave's paths. As for the route they were on, no matter how much they persisted in it, they would never reach the exit that way, because if they wanted to leave, they would have to return to the boss's chamber. Upon hearing this, Cry realized he had made a mistake, especially since he didn't even know those giant wolves were the bosses. And now it was Ruda's turn to ask where they were going. Even though he understood that was part of the plan, but Cry remained silent because he had no idea what he was doing. In fact, he just wanted everyone not to act as if they depended on him. And with that, he kept walking in silence. Suddenly, after Cry turned ahead, the other members were captivated by what was in the opposite direction, and Tino once again reiterated that everything her master did had a reason, and after that, they all ran in the opposite direction Cry had taken. Confused, he went to check what was happening and discovered that the soldiers they had come to rescue were in that corridor. The leader of the soldiers, Rudolph, thanked the newcomers devoutly for rescuing him, and Tino gave all the credit to her master, saying he always knew what he was doing. Cry replied that it seemed more like a coincidence, which left Gilbert intrigued by the leader's strange comment, while Greg noted that this only made him more mysterious and indecipherable. Ruda mentioned that he had given some potions to the wounded, but they were exhausted and needed food. Faced with this, Cry took out his bag, yes, the one that stored infinite chocolate, and distributed it to the soldiers. Gilbert asked how that worked, but Cray said it was a secret. Greg stated that when he heard that the missing soldiers were level 5, he was sure there was some mistake. But Rudolph revealed that they too had been caught by surprise, as no one expected those enemies to be so strong. Gilbert acknowledged that the wolves were strong, but was surprised they could defeat a level 5 group. However, Rudolph clarified that it wasn't the wolves that did it, but a single enemy, a small ghost with its face completely covered by a skull, as if it were the personification of resentment. That ghost was probably the manifestation of the Silver Moon curse that remained there, as after humans exterminated the wolves. Their hatred accumulated inside the vault and transformed into that absurd power. At least that was the theory Rudolph believed to be correct, as he couldn't imagine any other explanation. He and his men were confident, but that ghost seemed to be on the same level as the Thousand Swords. the greatest swordsman of the capital, who had formal training with the sacred blade and was a lunatic capable of defeating anyone with a wooden sword. Thinking about it, Cry knew well that this man was his childhood friend and a member of Stragri, and his name was Luke Cycle. Cry imagined the ghost was strong, but thought it was an exaggeration to place it at the same level as the Thousand Swords. Anyway, Luke wasn't there, and Tino wouldn't be able to defeat that ghost, so Cry regretted not waiting for Ark. Then he suggested that everyone should leave before encountering that creature. But since Tino was the mission leader, everyone had to respect her decision. Tino replied that she was trash compared to her master, but Cry assured her that this was part of the training and that if the rogue needed help, he would intervene. Actually, Cry was just tired of leading and wanted to pass that responsibility to someone else. But anyway, Tino accepted the role and agreed that the best option was to get out of there as quickly as possible. After resuming the journey, Tino led everyone to the exit. Rudolph pleaded to stay behind if anything happened to buy time while his companions were taken back. But Tino assured him that as long as the master was present, everything would be fine, and everyone would return home safely. Helian, one of Rudolph's subordinates, insisted that being the shield was his role, since his superior only accepted this mission because of him. Cry said they could settle that when they were safe in the capital. At that moment, dozens of howls echoed through the cave, and Cry calculated that he had 5 safety rings left and that on the 6th time, he would be down and out. To make matters worse, he had no more relics to use and the shooting ring would not be enough to stop the advancing enemies. As if that wasn't enough, the Citri slime had disappeared, and the sword tied to his waist had fallen somewhere. Under these circumstances, Cry wondered if this was the end. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure walked through the foggy corridors of the cave and teleported to another place. Amidst everything that was happening, Cry's group assumed that something very serious was about to happen, and Rudolph prepared for what was coming. Cry positioned himself in front of Tino and assessed that if he used the Night Hiker and became a human missile, he would die once but at least manage a surprise attack. At that moment, 4 purple flames illuminated the room, revealing the long talked about ghost. Instantly, everyone was stunned by the imposing presence of the enemy and began to tremble with fear. Behind the ghost, another mysterious figure appeared with a sword, making Tino begin to bid farewell to her master, while Cry wondered what Liz was doing there. Without delay, when the ghost looked back, Liz teleported to its flank and delivered a powerful kick, throwing the monster against the wall. After that, she returned the sword Cry had lost and explained that she came running, but was sad and embarrassed to know that the leader had to personally come to rescue his pupil, who was unable to solve the situation on her own. Saying this, Liz held Tino by the arms. Gilbert tried to say something about it, but Liz kicked him in the chest, warning that she was in the middle of an apology. My friend, she flattened the guy like truck kun hitting, just short of sending him to an isekai. Then she asked Tino if it was incompetence during training or a lack of ambition on the student's part, and after calmly asking, the teacher completely lost her composure and scolded her, saying she would die in the gutter before causing trouble for Cry's name. Seriously, folks, Liz was totally unhinged, the most unbalanced, weakest patient at the psych ward. Tino reacted by kneeling and begging for forgiveness, saying she was useless and horrible, and then Cry intervened, saying Tino had been excellent in today's mission and that Liz was also doing an excellent job. Hearing her master's praise, Liz felt proud of herself. At that moment, a giant wolf entered the area wielding a machine gun that fired wildly at the humans. Liz put her mask back on and practically froze time, catching one of the bullets flying toward her. When the wolf finished shooting, she let the bullet fall to the ground, furious that the opponents underestimated her by thinking they could defeat her with such a pathetic weapon. After that, she complained that her student had been afraid of that toy, ruining her reputation as a master. With that, she jumped on the giant wolf and kicked its head, dragging it to the ground and leaving a trail of energy that exploded insanely. Amidst the explosion, the woman shouted that killing enemies however she wanted was the most fun thing in the world. And with that done, only the ghost and its sword remained. He attacked Liz with impressive speed, but she stopped the blade mid-strike with just one hand, teaching her student that this was how it should be done and that such a move required no extraordinary effort. Then she kneed the ghost's stomach and followed with a punch that threw it to the ground. According to the Stragri member, all it takes is to kill the enemy so it doesn't attack you, always striking with everything, even if it risks your own life. While passing on these lessons to Tino, the teacher called her stupid in every name imaginable, to the point of making the girl cry. Amidst this beating, Cry noted that this ghost would have no chance against the Thousand Swords, and that it was precisely the battles between Liz and Luke that had made the Stragri evolve so much. Nowadays, Liz was faster than anything in this world, earning the nickname Broken Shadow. The scene shifted back to the capital after the victory, and Gilbert announced that Cry could keep the Sword of Purgatory because he planned to restart his journey from scratch and soon be able to catch bullets in the air like the Broken Shadow. Hearing that, Tino, Greg, and Ruda didn't believe it for a second. But the guy just wanted to dream and be happy. And well, since he wanted to be as strong as Liz, Tino had some advice about Stragri's custom masks. 6 years ago, Cry had messed up the mask order for his clan and ended up requesting them without even eye holes. And even so, all the members thought it was incredible and officially adopted the accessory, even if it didn't help them see. A year ago, a girl named Citri Smart gave Cry a slime because she felt safer that way. Citri is an alchemist and part of the Strange Grief group. And according to Cry, she's a bit eccentric, but a member of the Capital Science Institute and the mind behind Stragri, being considered the most renowned among alchemists to the point of earning the nickname Prodigy. From time to time, Citri makes Cry test the crazy concoctions she creates in her laboratory. As for this slime, she only advised the leader to be very careful, because if it was accidentally dropped, it could simply blow up the capital. Back in the present day, Cry is frantically searching for Citri's slime in his room. After searching so much and failing, he sits down to think about where it could be, recalling when he opened the capsule in the White Wolf's den and noticed it was empty. Initially, it had been kept in a vault that Cry never opened, and the vault itself is a relic. Thus, the leader of the Stragri concludes that the vault had always been empty, lies down on the bed, laughs nervously, and comments on how playful Citri is. However, at the same time, he considers that thinking too much about it could make him sick. Meanwhile, in the White Wolf's den, a warrior defeats a ghost and asks her partner if that place shouldn't be level 3. He replies that the level of the ghost suddenly increased in recent weeks. And then the woman highlights that the association's investigative missions are no joke, while the man concludes that investigating anomalies in treasure vaults is also vital for the kingdom. Moreover, he recalls that the Thousand Tricks is also investigating the matter, suggesting that something strange is happening there. Back to Cry, the young man barely slept, obsessed with thoughts about the slime. As he leaves his room, Ava approaches him, informing that the association requires a detailed report on the White Wolf's den. Lazy as always, Cry responds that Tino was the expedition team leader, so she should take care of the report. But she explains that Tino is training with Liz, and, well, having no way to escape. Cry asks if there was any commotion in the capital regarding this mission, and Ava mentions she doesn't know anything but promises to investigate. At this point, our protagonist asks her to drop the subject and announces that he will check on Tino himself, and Ava informs him that she is in the training room on the second sub-level. With the boss leaving, Ava ponders that from natural disasters like earthquakes, anomalies in treasure vaults, and even fights among the nobles of the capital, he continues to predict everything without any clue. Mentioning that she's tired of seeing this happen because if it were 1 or 2 times, it could be passed off as a coincidence, but after a third supposed coincidence, it kind of starts to become a pattern. The scene shifts, and we see Cry arriving at the sub-level where Sven, the leader of the Obsidian Cross, awaits him. Without delay, Sven asks Cry to stop the Broken Shadow because she is disrupting the use of the training room. In this regard, Cry argues that monster elimination is his responsibility, to which the man responds that Ansen and Lucia are also absent, so there is no one to stop that girl. Furthermore, he wants to know how Liz returned on her own. And the leader explains that she disarmed all the traps and reached the boss room but got bored and returned. Impressed, Sven emphasizes that the Night Palace is a level 8 vault, so only someone with a few screws loose would get bored on such a mission. But anyway, he insists that if someone doesn't intervene soon and stop Liz, Tino could end up done for. With that, Cry forces a smile and states that people don't die so easily. But when the doors to the hall open for him, Liz is standing over an unconscious Tino in front of her, still threatening the student without the slightest caution. Moreover, she raises her leg to finish the girl off, considering she wouldn't get up as ordered, so Cry needs to stop the training before a tragedy happens. Losing patience, Liz interrupts what she was planning and tells the leader she was just training Tino and that this girl seems to have more talent than her own tutor, but is still very weak. Honestly, Liz doesn't quite understand why, since she was much stronger at that age. Cry understands the teacher's passion, but explains that the student apparently reached her limit, so he asks for the training to be stopped for the day. Unable to believe what she heard, Liz questions if she is being stopped as if it were the end of the world, when suddenly Tino grabs her ankle and says she can still move. Cry asks why the girl is wearing a mask, while Liz celebrates the student's determination, saying they can now continue the training, and wow, she really enjoys the torture. Thus, Cry leaves the hall and informs the others that, unfortunately, there is no way to stop Liz when she's like that. And although frustrated, Sven considers it good for everyone that Tino becomes stronger. Changing the subject, he reports that the northern route has been closed because several ghosts have appeared. Then the scene shifts, and we see the two of them gather for tea, where Sven adds that there is an investigation underway, and it seems that the Order of the Night group was caught by surprise. About this, Cry heard that travelers were attacked by ghosts from the White Wolf's den and imagines that's why Gark wanted to see him. Thinking about it, the young man regrets that Ark isn't around at a time like this, as besides being strong and smart, the guy is much more reliable than Cry himself. The man is simply an exemplary leader and a fighter well above average, not inferior to anyone. And if Cry left everything in his hands, everything would surely go well. But as that's not possible at the moment, the leader of Stragri decides to do what he can to buy time. Observing the chief in thought, Sven comments that he is as calm as ever, making Cry think that it's because the problem isn't his. At that moment, he has the brilliant idea to send the Obsidian Cross to see Gark, hoping he can instruct the clan on how to handle the situation. Consequently, he asks the members of the group to visit the manager of the Adventurers Association and inform him that Cry won't be able to attend. Having said that, Cry departs after ridding himself of yet another responsibility, which leads the second member of the Obsidian Cross to question the behavior of their absolute leader, noting that he always stays home while others go on missions. Sven responds that the young man still doesn't understand how Cry's mind works. He has always been like this, but it is precisely this behavior that makes him the driving force behind Stragri and the Obsidian Cross. In fact, Sven believes Cry is somewhat of a monster and shouldn't be underestimated by his appearance. Night falls, and Gark is informed that there have been no changes in the energy lines near the White Wolf's den. And his assistant adds that the amount of mana material hasn't changed either. The leader now needs to speak to Cry to find out what caused the anomaly in the treasure vault, but the Obsidian Cross reported that he is too busy to show up. Nonetheless, Gark plans to see the protagonist tomorrow, confident that he knows something. Meanwhile, in a mysterious laboratory, a man comments that he didn't expect a high-level hunter to get involved in this situation. Other men wearing uniforms with the same symbol approach, and one mentions that it's only a matter of time before the Adventurers Association discovers this place, to which the old man replies that the factory troops should not be underestimated. Another man adds that mere hunters wouldn't understand the work the Great Master of Mages, head of research for the Akasha Tower division in the capital, is doing there. Regarding this project, the Master explains that this mechanism harnesses the immense power of the energy lines, and storing it there is causing alterations in the treasure vaults. If this experiment progresses and proves the head of research's theory, they might even manage to create treasure vaults at will. With that said, other members of the group express concerns about having to abandon the laboratory and start over. At the same time, they complain that Sophia is taking a vacation at such a crucial moment, as she is responsible for the defense system. The Master explains that he granted the leave to his subordinate and contacted her using the harmonic stone, so Sophia will return soon, and they mention that if she were already present, she would have resolved this impasse. Back to Cray, he's having a nightmare where the capital is in flames and under attack by a creature. Because of this, he wonders if Citri's slime is really that dangerous, but quickly concludes that no, since his dreams never come true. Suddenly, Liz wakes up beside him to his surprise, although it's not the first time the meddlesome girl has sneaked into his bed at night. Moreover, the girl has just invited the chief to do something today. And shortly after, when coming down from the room, Cry encounters Gark, but Liz immediately warns that he is busy today. Taking advantage of the Broken Shadow's presence, the association manager demands the report she was supposed to make about the Night Palace, but the girl retorts that the association overburdens Cry with everything. Not wanting her time with the chief to be ruined, she kicks the manager in the face, but he skillfully defends himself and warns that even someone as peaceful as him has limits. With that, the two start a fight, so Cry takes the opportunity to invite Kaina for tea. Joining the manager's assistant, he accidentally reveals that there is more beyond the problem with the White Wolf's den, but before he can explain, he lies, saying he can't reveal anything, yet fearing someone from outside might overhear. In fact, he knows he must have released an extremely dangerous slime into the capital, but can't admit this to anyone. Anyway, considering he's busier than ever, the leader of Stragri warns that he won't have time to solve this mess, but Ark is the right man for the job. Meanwhile, the hall is turning into ruins because of the fight between Liz and Gark. With each blow, the Broken Shadow provokes the manager for being out of shape and seems in control of the situation. However, the man finally loses patience with the girl's insolence and fully releases a massive energy emanating from his body. When Cry returns to the hall, he remembers that the Zabrudia branch manager used to be called the War Demon during his days as a level 7 hunter, and to prevent the building from collapsing at this man's hands, he asks both fighters to stop the violence, and when Ava arrives, she is shocked by the destruction that has taken over the place. Soon, Cry and Liz finally leave together, and the girl continues to taunt Gark, saying he's become a weak old man. For his part, he wouldn't be so sure, but Liz is convinced the manager wouldn't pass through the Night Palace at that level. Speaking of which, Cry asks if the dungeon boss was tougher than the one in the White Wolf's den, but Liz found the den boss so easy to defeat she didn't even notice it was a boss. With that, Cry remembers that Citri and the others are still in the Night Palace, and if they don't return soon, the lost slime could cause massive chaos. Liz notices that the boy seems worried and asks what's going on, so he asks what she would do if all of Zabrudia were destroyed. Liz replies that she would flee somewhere south with Cry as she's never seen the sea before and it would be a great opportunity. With that, the broken shadow leaves her bag in the boy's hands and runs to immobilize the civilian's arm, claiming the man was looking at them strangely. However, Cry asks the girl to let him go and the man flees. Afterward, the fugitive reaches a safe place and wonders why the 1,000 tricks let him escape, suspecting that Cry knows something about the plan. The next day, Cry and Liz go to the most dangerous part of the city, and she, completely innocently, still thinks she is on a date with our protagonist. Cry tells her to tone down her excitement as this is not a date and he is there for work. According to information he received from Eva, many people have been disappearing in the slums, and although this would not normally concern him, he fears that the missing slime might be involved somehow. As a bonus, there is a new ice cream parlor nearby, and Cry plans to take a look after doing the minimum necessary for his mission. He tells Liz that they should visit the ice cream parlor first, and she gets very excited, but the owner of the ice cream parlor does not, as he is the same man Liz captured last time, but Cry let him go. He fears that Cry really let him go on purpose and is now there to capture him. He can't even comprehend how Cry discovered that this ice cream parlor was just a front for one of the Akasha Tower's research bases and is even planning to close the shop immediately, but the door suddenly opens and a red-haired woman named Sophia appears. The man sees hope rising on the horizon, as Sophia is in charge of all defense matters in the organization. Outside, Liz grows impatient and tries to break down the door, but Cry stops her, saying that maybe the shop won't open today and that they should just leave. She, even though completely reluctant, ends up obeying, and they then return to the clan, much to the relief of the fake merchant. Back at the office, Cry asks Liz if she knows when the alchemist Citri will return from the level 8 treasure vault. Liz says she might take a while, and Cry just hopes she returns before his slime destroys the entire city. At that moment, Eva enters the office and informs them that the Hunter Association has formed a team to investigate the White Wolf's den. And it seems that this time they are taking it very seriously, as they are even sending a relic specialist to see if they find anything new. Cry thinks that this sounds important but is not bothered, as he won't go there anyway. On the other hand, the merchant arrives at the Akasha Tower headquarters and tells everyone that Cry found him. He is terrified because Cry saw through his perfect disguise and still took no action against them. Trembling, he says he can't even imagine what goes through Cry's mind. And the others also feel lost in this situation. Guys, I find it very funny how this anime gives me a feeling of similarity with the anime The Eminence in Shadow, where Sid is kind of taking everything in one direction and the people interpret his movements always in a very heroic or mysterious way. Anyway, moving on, they turn to Sophia for suggestions, and she says they should face Cry and his clan head on. Everyone is obviously shocked, but she assures them that they have a chance of winning, even though the enemy is at level 8. She mentions that she is confident that the security system she built can defeat Cry's clan, and the Master of Mages gives her permission to do whatever she wants, as they cannot avoid this fight forever. The next day, the First Step clan building is full of adventurers. Tino then enters the place and is shocked to see so many people and asks a guy what is happening. He says that everyone has gathered to investigate the White Wolf's den, and Tino thinks this is an exaggeration. However, the guy says that Cry planned to send Ark there first. And Tino is even more surprised. After all, sending a level 7 hunter like Ark to a level 3 treasure vault means that the situation is more serious than one might imagine. Because of this and the fact that Ark himself is not there, the association and the clan gathered all these hunters as if they were his substitutes. As events unfold, we see that Cry and Ava also arrive, and Cry asks if all those people have gathered for some kind of festival. Ava explains that since Cry asked Ark to take care of the task, she gathered a force that could act as a substitute, which surprises Cry, as he mentioned Ark because he is the typical Mr. Perfect who does everything flawlessly. He thinks that sending so many people will cost a fortune, so he suggests cutting the number in half. The hunters panic upon hearing this, thinking they are going to die now, and Eva calms everyone down and says that Cry must have something important to say, which he obviously does not. He tries to explain that the difficulty of the mission will not be as high as they think, but they refuse to believe it. Cry turns to Eva and asks about the rewards for the hunters and finds out that Chief Gark has released additional funds to ensure everyone is well paid. With the money issue resolved, Cry tells the hunters to do whatever they want, and they are happy to all be able to go together to the vault. At that moment, Liz arrives and calls them cowards, saying that they are weak and do not even have the courage to overcome challenges and become stronger. She jumps to Cry's side, saying that she will take on this mission and only needs Tino to accompany her. Cry immediately refuses the request, as he does not want to put Tino's life in danger and does not want to lower the morale of the others. He says that everyone there will go on the mission, and then Ava tells him to take command of the group. which spells trouble for our protagonist. Cry is surprised to hear this, but everyone else feels relieved, thinking their safety is guaranteed now that the clan master will be with them. Cry realizes he cannot simply say he won't go with them, so he states that he will join the group later and that, until then, Sven, who is already at the White Wolf's den, will be in charge. Before everyone departs, Cry tells one of the hunters to be careful with slime monsters if they appear in the vault. The team of treasure hunters then heads to the vault, unaware that it houses the Akasha Tower's base, while the enemies believe Cry has sent the hunters to confront them. While they are divided on how to react, Sophia says this is the chance to attack the hunters while they are still unprepared. She states that her defense system was designed to fight the most powerful hunters, and only the combined Stragri group could defeat it. However, only Cry, Liz, and the alchemist Citri are near the capital at this moment, and she already has plans on how to defeat Cry and Liz. Citri is the only one against whom she doesn't have a foolproof strategy, but it seems Sophia has a personal grudge against her, and declares that she will defeat her personally. She says that Citri discovered the Master's theory about creating new treasure vaults, and has also been trying to do so. Sophia asserts that they cannot allow her to continue, and asks the mage for permission to use all firepower against her. The mage grants permission and appoints her as the commander of the forces for this battle, but his right-hand man does not seem too pleased with this. Above them, Sven and his group find nothing unusual, but he still believes that Cry sent them there for some special purpose. Suddenly, he receives a call and asks a colleague to blow the emergency whistle to alert the other hunters. As soon as they leave, Sven relays Cry's message about being cautious with slime monsters, and the hunters get annoyed at following the orders of a man who doesn't even have the courage to be present. Sven tells them to trust Cry's judgment and recounts a story about how he once invited everyone to a flower viewing party and told them to bring their weapons. At the moment Cry made the toast, a treasure vault manifested behind him, and everyone realized he had predicted it. The hunters are surprised by the story, and Sven once again says that Cry's information is more valuable than anything else they could find. Back in Cry's office, Liz is pestering him, asking for some task because she wants to show off her fighting skills in front of him. Cry is already annoyed with her behavior and wonders how much longer he will have to put up with her until the hunters solve the problem at the White Wolf's den, so he can show up there at the end. At that moment, the alchemist Citri arrives, telling Cry that she is there to help him deal with an incredibly strong and cunning organization that could soon become a threat to the entire world. Cry immediately kicks Liz and Tino out of the office upon hearing the details about the Akasha Tower from Citri, and on the other side of the city, Gark also dons his battle armor to enter the treasure vault and prove that his days of glory are not yet over. His assistant tries to stop him, knowing he could end up getting hurt in this endeavor, but Citri ends up appearing there and shares important information about their true enemies. In a flashback, we see that Cry recalls a conversation he had years ago with Citri, where she mentioned that she wasn't physically strong like the team's other members, but wanted to help them in her own way. Our protagonist advised her to become an alchemist. As we return to the present, we see Cry and Citri talking about her slime, and Citri tells our protagonist that the slime she created has the ability to quickly adapt to its environment, but it's a faulty and unstable prototype. However, she assured that the slime would never attack either her or Cry, which makes him worry because, if discussed thoroughly, it means that it has free reign to devastate the rest of the city. He had told Citri that he didn't know how or when the slime disappeared, so she simply believes it must have escaped from the capsule and fled through the drainage system. Cry feels a bit relieved that she trusts him blindly, and then Citri says there's something else she needs to talk about, which might be even more dangerous than the out-of-control slime. The scene shifts to the White Wolf's lair, where we see Sven learning from reinforcements that Cry won't be joining them anytime soon, and also didn't allow Liz to go. Sven mentions that he feels relieved they didn't send the scatterbrained Liz there, and then decides to gather everyone to check on the morale of all the treasure hunters present there. He then starts a speech and asks if they're ready to face slimes, and well, all the hunters respond that there's no need to prepare to defeat slimes, so they don't have to worry about them. Sven already knew the responses would be at this level, which is why he curses our protagonist for giving vague information. At that moment, a hunter decides to enter the vault because he believes that creating strategies is for the weak. Everyone mocks him for not understanding what's going on there, and Sven says he can happily become the first victim of the monsters, but he just asked him not to die in vain and to leave some clues so they can avenge him later. The guy then calls them a bunch of cowards as he moves forward, and someone timidly raises their hand to ask a question. We then see it's a red-haired girl. And to me, she's Sophia. Yes, the defense chief of the Akasha Tower who's infiltrated in the group. And if it's not her, the animators are just wasting time to save on designs. She claims to be an alchemist belonging to Cry's clan, saying she worked alongside Citri in research on slimes, and then pulls out a medicine vial, mentioning that it can kill any slime, no matter how powerful. After that, Sven encourages the treasure hunters telling them to aim for glory but return home alive. We then see that the investigation begins. And by the end of the day, they find nothing but ghost wolves that are slightly stronger than usual. Sven wonders if Cry was wrong this time but thinks it will be good if it's true. At that moment, that same arrogant fool appears and says that if Sven hadn't given them such useless orders, the mission would already be over. He then steps away because, according to him, he needs to take a number one. And while doing his business, he mentions how cowardly the Obsidian Cross and its members are, even calling the Thousand Tricks an idiot, saying that if Ark were leading this group, things would be different. Then, he hears a strange sound and goes to check it out. And upon seeing it, he's simply shocked to find two men and a huge chained wolf beast. The men belong to the Akasha Tower and are there to use magic with that creepy syringe inside the wolf to make it super strong and take down as many hunters as possible, according to Sophia's plan. The hunter, realizing that something's off upon seeing the giant injection, decides to advance and confront the two guys. He manages to take one of them down with a kick to the chest, but the other resorts to magic and throws some fireballs, which the hunter manages to block. After the block, he advances against the mage and punches him squarely in the face, knocking him down. He then grabs one of the men by the collar and starts hitting him, asking what they're doing there. The man responds with another question, asking if he was sent there by the Thousand Tricks, the knight. However, responds that he's acting on his own, and while he might be good at taking action, thinking is certainly not his forte. After all, while he's busy beating up the man, the other guy who was there with the dubious syringe simply walks over to the wolf with great patience and injects it. Upon doing so, we see the wolf start to melt and become stronger, and the two men declare that this monster will seek out the highest concentration of mana nearby and absorb it to grow even more powerful. The monster immediately drains the mana from both sorcerers, and the hunter, seeing the danger before his eyes, blows the warning whistle to alert everyone. Sven tells everyone to get ready to fight as soon as he hears the whistle, and they gather outside the forest armed and prepared. Shortly after, the hunter appears, running severely injured and missing an arm, saying that Cry was right all along and that a powerful slime monster is in the forest. At that moment, the ghost wolf, which transformed into a slime due to the serum, arrives, and Sven shoots an arrow at it, trying to destroy its legs before anything else. The mages launch fire and ice attacks at the slime wolf, but nothing affects it. Meanwhile, Sven and the healer check on the hunter, who tells them he saw two mysterious figures injecting something into the ghost wolf, turning it into a slime. The slime wolf emerges from the magical bombardment unscathed, and Sven decides to attempt physical attacks. He points his bow at the slime and quickly fires half a dozen arrows, but they cause no damage to the slime wolf. Sven is shocked to see that neither magical nor physical attacks work against the slime, but he still tells the hunters that they will fight as long as they can. The slime wolf starts attacking them, and Sven instructs them to keep their distance and dodge the attacks as the monster is quite slow. He then runs over to the not yet confirmed Sophia and asks for the anti-slime chemical she had. She tells him that the slime should self-destruct if it comes into contact with the potion, and Sven takes on the mission to ensure that happens. He starts running while trying to lure the slime wolf, which suddenly leaps toward him. Sven quickly places the vial on the ground and steps aside. The slime wolf lands on the vial and breaks it, and upon touching the chemical, numerous explosions occur inside its body. Everyone thinks this will be the end of the fight, but the slime wolf absorbs the explosions and still survives. Sven is disheartened because it wasn't a slime after all. If it were, it would have certainly died. The armored guy next to him says that Cry mentioned it was a slime-like creature, not exactly a slime, and Sven starts cursing him for not conveying things more clearly. Suddenly, Sitri arrives to help, as she literally begged Cry to put her in charge of the White Wolf's lair. She tells Sven that the reason they can't hurt the slime wolf is that its dense mana is acting as a barrier. She's intrigued by this unique monster she's never seen before, but with a quick glance she figures out exactly how the ghost wolf melted and transformed into slime. She then approaches the dangerous monster, easily dodging its attacks while noticing that it's hunting for people with more mana to restore its body to normal. She feels sorry for it, thinking it's someone's failed experiment, and decides to kill it. She throws a vial at the slime wolf and asks Sven to shoot it. Sven fires and hits the vial with precision, destroying the slime wolf's head. She says the vial contained anti-mana metal that neutralizes the monster's defenses. At that moment, Gark also arrives in full battle gear, and Sven is surprised to see him like that. Sitri explains that she asked Gark for a ride earlier because unlike Liz, she couldn't just sprint over there. This doesn't answer all of Sven's questions, so Sitri explains that she has an idea of what just happened and who's behind it. She leads everyone to a campsite where she explains the existence of the Akasha Tower and its leader, the Master Mage. The guys who look like important executives comment that the mage was exiled from the Imperial capital a long time ago, and she asks if they really think exiles are effective. She tells them that this vault is the base of the Akasha Tower, and then Talia, who I still believe is Sophia, suggests they might have many important pieces of equipment there. Sitri agrees and says she already has a good idea of their plan, confirming that the Akasha Tower is certainly prepared for battle. She is determined to stop them and put an end to their illegal and dangerous experiments, and to do so she asks everyone to follow her, saying that she's not Cry, but she will still do her best. Later, as everyone prepares for the fight, Sven's assistant comments that Sitri seems quite courageous. He tells him not to underestimate her because she uses her weakness as a means to resort to every possible method to win, and in that sense, she's as monstrous as the other members of Strugri. Meanwhile, the scene changes and we see Liz dubiously sitting on Cry's lap begging him to let her go help Sitri because she's the weakest, and Tino seeing this scene is probably dying of secondhand embarrassment. And our protagonist? Well, he obviously rejects her tantrums.
Now let's move on to the Akasha Tower, where we see that the organization's members were not happy with Sophia's order. She commanded them to send the fortified phantoms one by one. According to them, this would only waste resources, as isolated phantoms are easier to defeat than when sent in groups. Flick argued that Sophia, being just a researcher, had no knowledge of war strategies, and because of this baseless order, they tried to summon her to resolve the situation. However, she had mentioned she was going to check the defense system and then disappeared, becoming inaccessible through her communication stone. Frustrated, Flick reminded everyone that they were facing a trap-filled situation and that without full preparation, they could encounter serious problems. A companion recalled that the master had given Sophia full authority, but what mattered was victory. With that, Flick decided to act on his own and ordered all the phantoms to be released at once, promising to teach Sophia the true principles of war. The scene changes, and now we move to the camp, where the superiors interrogated captured enemies after discovering that Akasha was behind the creation of these fortified phantoms. Sitri assured them she would spare the men's lives and asked if their master was Magus. However, they refused to answer, preferring death over betraying their master. Even so, this statement was enough for the alchemist to deduce that they were disciples of Noctis Cochlea, typical followers of that impostor. She revealed that she had been following the Akasha Tower for a long time and, furthermore, that she knew all of them. She mentioned that she wanted to resolve things through dialogue and asked once again about Noctis. The men, showing loyalty to their master, remained silent until she pulled out a vial, mentioning that the supposed colored water contained within it would loosen their tongues. One of the men protested against its use, saying that it was an illegal potion that confused consciousness, forced confessions, and erased memories. However, the girl emphasized that without adequate answers, Noctis would surely escape. This anime never ceases to amaze me. Just when I thought there would be no surprises, they even included human rights representatives in the story. Producing fortified phantoms is fine. Hunters losing an arm like the citizen in the previous episode, and even their lives if we talk about others we don't know, is also fine. Interrogation? Now that's too much. Anyway, following the plot, Gark interrupted, recognizing that Sitri had a good argument, but that they couldn't treat prisoners any way they wanted, since, unlike the prisoners, they weren't criminals. He mentioned that she certainly understood this better than anyone. Sitri then replied that she was just joking because the liquid she carried was only colored water. To prove it, she drank the substance herself, showing that nothing happened, merely mentioning that they were out of time. As she finished her sentence, a loud noise emerged from the forest, and the members of the meeting quickly left the tent to check what had happened, while the roar of a monster echoed. The captured Akasha members laughed and celebrated the arrival of a powerful ally, indicating the hunter's demise. From the depths of the forest, a massive creature emerged toward the humans, while Sven, completely perplexed, questioned how they would defeat something like that. Sitri explained that there were various types of magical barriers created by the phantoms, so it would be necessary to analyze the attributes, location, and method to break them. Assuming that the difference was crucial, she instructed the frontline soldiers to position themselves with their shields at the vanguard. The men were apprehensive about this order, and she justified it by saying it was necessary to check the force and direction of the exit field. If the soldiers felt any force flowing through their shoulders, they should release it quickly to avoid losing an arm. Sweating nervously, a shield bearer named Lyle positioned himself with his shield, but when attacked by the giant, his shield was flung far away. Sitri ordered the mages to paralyze the phantom's movements, but the giant dodged the spells cast. Observing this, Citri analyzed that the force field was spinning and moving to the right, and that depending on where someone touched the field, they were pushed back, making close combat against the Phantom a nightmare. Upon hearing this, Gark lamented that his axe was useless in this battle, and wondered if the solution would be to wait for the Phantom's mana to run out. Citri responded that because of its size and mana material, the fun here could last about an hour more than enough time for the monster to cause significant damage. Sven finally understood why Cry had sent Ark to deal with this. Citri added that if they focused all their attack power on a single point and kept firing, they might destroy the target's weak point and bring it down. However, she emphasized that this Phantom's technology was highly advanced, and with their current firepower, this could be difficult. To make matters worse, a second fortified Phantom appeared on the battlefield. Sven asked Citri to order a retreat as the men were exhausted and could not handle a threat of this level at the moment. Gark, on the other hand, believed that even fleeing would be complicated and asked if they could call for reinforcements from the mages. Despite the men's concerns, Citri, somewhat anticipating the chaos, was impressed by Akasha Tower's capacity to be led by such fools. With that, she ordered the mages to cease their attacks and for everyone to retreat. Then the plot twist welcomed us by showing the two Phantoms meeting and starting to fight each other. Well, now we begin to understand why Sophia wanted to send them one at a time, as this problem could complicate things for them. At that moment, a third Phantom noticed the commotion and decided to join the chaos. Looking around, the humans realized the forest was surrounded by these creatures, all fighting each other. Observing the scene in disbelief, Talia, who I believe is Sophia, questioned why they didn't simply send one at a time. The scene shifts, and in Akasha Tower, we see Magus scolding the group harshly, reaffirming that Sophia's words should be treated as his own. Listening through the communication stone, Sophia humiliated Flick, stating that even without combat experience, she would never give a senseless order, and mentioned that Flick lacked imagination. Aware that this opportunity had been wasted, the leader asked Sophia about the next step. She reported that the situation had already changed since both Citri and Gark had joined the troops. Upon hearing that name, the others couldn't hide their fear, as even though he was somewhat retired, the war demon still posed a significant threat, especially with Akasha Tower running low on potions. Still, Sophia stated that retreating was not the solution, especially now that the enemy had taken hostages, which jeopardized critical information about Akasha's base. Sophia then decreed that they should deploy the Malice Eaters and attack first. This way, they could lure the enemy into their range and use their full strength to win after all. If everyone ended up dead, there would be no information leaks. Noctis pointed out that the Malice Eaters were still in training, so someone would need to command them. Sophia announced that it was time for Flick to prove himself and place the monsters under his command. Faced with the challenge, Flick seemed apprehensive but swallowed his doubts and assured them he would do an excellent job, especially after his previous embarrassment. Once again, the scene shifts to the survivors' camp, where Talia considers Citri a rare example among hunters, worthy of the nickname Prodigy. Endowed with immense talent and intelligence, Citri is not only a genius but also constantly seeks the truth, regardless of the dangers she might face. Always acting within the law, Talia admitted to feeling envious of her colleague's extreme intelligence, believing she could never measure up. Sven interrupted Talia's reflections, expressing frustration over the anti-slime substance not working and complaining that Cry never shared truly relevant information on these missions. He mentioned that the enemy was something like a slime but wasn't really. Ignoring this, Sven tried to understand why the prisoners kept staring at the girl. Since she didn't know either, he advised her to stay alert before leaving. Meanwhile, Gark joined Citri with something to drink, asking her not to push herself too hard in this investigation, as the association couldn't handle Akasha Tower alone. To the manager's surprise, the alchemist revealed she already had an idea where the enemy base was located. Without wasting time, she gathered the investigation leaders to share her findings. Considering the flow of spiritual lines, the concentration of mana material, geological aspects, and the emergence location of the monsters, Citri suspected the enemy base was on a hill. The Akasha prisoners panicked, claiming the analysis was completely wrong, but their reaction only confirmed to the alchemist that she was right. Thus, she announced that the best course of action was to attack before the enemies could escape. Even more terrified, the prisoners shouted Sophia's name, piquing the allies' curiosity. Citri then revealed that Sophia was her greatest enemy, and the true mastermind behind Akasha Tower. She stated that as long as Sophia wasn't defeated, this malicious research would never end, and that along with Noctis, They were the most treacherous and despicable magicians. In Citri's view, it was her fault that Sophia was still free, but she assured them she wouldn't repeat the mistake of the past, and that soon Sophia would be imprisoned in Historia of the South. Meanwhile, we see Cry approaching the camp alongside Liz and Tino. The Thousand Tricks was worried about arriving too early, as his plan was to show up only after everything was resolved. After all, he didn't have enough relics or safety rings, and without tricks to defend himself, the situation could become critical. The path ahead was completely dark, so Tino tried to hold her master's hand. However, Liz acted out of absurd jealousy and almost beat Tino up on the spot, saying it would take billions of light years before Tino was worthy of holding that man's hand. Cry corrected her, saying light years were a measure of distance, not time, but let it go, and used his owl vision to see the path ahead, not knowing how long the relic would last. Regardless, Liz reassured the protagonist, promising to destroy anything in their way, and turned to Tino, ordering her to do the same. Meanwhile, a hunter who had lost his arm concluded that the Thousand Tricks wouldn't show up, and realized that even though he criticized him, if he had followed his advice earlier, his arm wouldn't be in that condition. Citri mentioned that Cry was practically born to be a treasure hunter and would undoubtedly reach level 10. The guy nearby nearly freaked out upon hearing this and said he wanted to meet him even more, claiming he must be very strong. Citri mentioned that he was strong, but that strength was just one attribute, and that even if he was weaker than a sand rabbit in combat, it wouldn't matter because he was extraordinary. Sven then questioned why Citri hadn't brought her usual magical creature. She responded that Killiam was under maintenance but was interrupted when a spell fiercely struck the group. Above them, Flick boasted about the Calamitous Thunder, his high-class magical attack. Confidently, he declared that Sophia wouldn't be needed as long as he was in charge of this mission. Landing amidst the destroyed enemy group, he regretted using so much mana, but felt that annihilating the opponents with a single blow was worth it. However, Sven mustered strength to recognize Akasha Tower, while Citri emerged unscathed, finding it curious that the enemy used an area spell despite having hostages. Moreover, she lamented that a spell of that level wouldn't be enough to defeat her, especially compared to the high-level treasures they regularly faced. With that, the alchemist pulled out a pistol and sprayed a strange liquid on Sven, who quickly regenerated and attacked Flick without hesitation. With a sword strike, he brought the man down, but the Malice Eater blocked Sven's second attack and prepared a counterattack. At that moment, Gark intervened, standing in front of the monster and striking it with his axe, while Citri regenerated the other allies. At Akasha's base, Magus was furious with Flick for not bringing all the Malice Eaters as ordered, but only one. Moreover, not even a significant power like Calamitous Thunder had caused relevant damage to the association. This led them to suspect that everything was part of a scheme by the Thousand Tricks, planned to unfold exactly this way. However, Noctis wasn't ready to flee yet, as they still had the remaining Malice Eaters and a trump card, Akasha and Sophia herself. With that, they prepared to defend the base with everything they had. The hunters arrived at the enemy base, and Gark called Citri and Sven to lead the attack. Meanwhile, Cry's group followed the trail of the Calamitous Thunder that had struck the forest. The episode ended, leaving us with questions. What is Akasha, the ultimate weapon Noctis mentioned? How will Sophia make her entrance? And how will our protagonist continue to have no role in any of this, yet still get credit for everything? We then see that Citri and the other hunters find the entrance to the Akasha Tower base, but Sven thinks they shouldn't go in without being properly prepared. Gark, however, says that he alone is more than enough to tank the situation. He then asks Citri and Sven to trust him, and head into the cave because he wants to show Liz that he still has the fighting spirit within him. With that, they advance toward the cave, but the members of the Akasha Tower are ready to face them with their flying lions. However, this is just a strategy to buy time while Magus activates his trump card in his laboratory, a giant golem. Magus claims that this is the most powerful weapon of the Akasha Tower, and is confident that the enemies won't be able to defeat it. The golem then emerges from the cave and Gark stands before it ready to fight. The golem begins the battle with a heavy attack and Gark has to use immense strength to block it. Meanwhile, the other members of the Akasha Tower decide to join the attack as well. They fly high, out of Sven's and the other fighters' reach, and as chaos unfolds on the battlefield, we see two prisoners trying to cut the ropes tying their hands. One of the flying lions attacks Sven, injuring him, but he quickly heals himself and encourages his friends not to lose hope. The situation seems dire for the treasure hunters, but what the enemies didn't expect was that Liz would arrive at the scene. With impressive speed, she strikes one of the flying lions, obliterating it, and everyone is thrilled by her presence, with Sven urging them to push forward. Meanwhile, Cry and Tino are alone in the forest. Our protagonist is somewhat worried because Liz went to fight, leaving him without a reliable bodyguard. Tino then alerts him to the presence of others nearby and asks if she should deal with them, but he dismisses it, thinking they are just wild animals. However, the people Tino noticed are actually the prisoners from the Akasha Tower, who are confused about why Cry is allowing them to escape. Cry has no idea who they are, and as he decides to continue the journey, he faces a setback when his night vision lenses stop working. Because of this, he asks Tino to guide him. Back on the battlefield, Liz is dominating the flying lions and questioning the other treasure hunters about how they could struggle with them. She calls Citri weak, and Citri questions what she is doing there. Liz responds that she begged Cry to let her come and fight. With extremely fast and precise movements, she attacks the golem but realizes that it is more resilient than expected. Liz continues her strategy of attacking the golem at high speed, pushing it and causing small damages. Gark, determined not to be outdone, uses his axe to freeze the golem. The golem then falls to the ground and Sven targets it for an attack. The golem deactivates for a moment but soon reboots and launches a counterattack. Gark tries to strike it with his ice axe again, but the golem dodges and jumps high, leaving everyone surprised that such a massive metal contraption could be so agile. This even reminds them of Ansem, who is almost the same size as the golem but even more agile. Liz wonders if the golem was inspired by her friend, but decides it doesn't matter because she needs to destroy it. She then leaps to attack, but the golem detaches one of its hands, revealing a cannon, and fires at her. The energy blast grazes Liz's abdomen, forcing her to retreat as she isn't skilled at dealing with ranged attacks. As the golem continues firing, Liz tries to dodge, and Citri thinks it will be difficult to defeat the monster, even with her sister's offensive power. She suggests they fight until the golem's mana runs out and it stops functioning. Liz says that's out of the question and declares she will handle this no matter what, then attacks the golem to prove she can defeat it. With a powerful combo, she brings the monster down and Gark attacks the golem's leg to finish it off. However, the golem activates boosters on its back and takes off, making Liz give up on fighting it. At that moment, Cry shows up and asks everyone how they are. He doesn't seem fazed at all by the enormous golem in front of him, and everyone is confident the fight will end quickly since the strongest hunter has arrived. The golem starts flying toward Cry and Tino clings to him in fear. However, he continues acting indifferent. Suddenly, the golem is simply repelled before reaching him, crashing against the wall. It then shuts down, and everyone, including me, asks Cry what trick he used this time. Little do they know, Cry didn't even see the golem the entire time, as his lenses ran out of mana. He then asks Tino why everyone is acting as if something amazing happened. Guys, this anime is unbearable with its coincidences. Anyway, the fight ends there, and the treasure hunters raid the Akasha Tower base, confiscating everything they find. Cry receives a report from Citri, who thanks him for sending Liz to help them at the right moment. However, the battle is not over yet, and Citri plans to destroy the Akasha Tower herself. Meanwhile, the two prisoners who escaped encounter Magus and others who fled the base after their defeat. The two men are certain that the red-haired alchemist among the treasure hunters is Sophia and tell Magus that she infiltrated the enemy base and might be planning something. Magus, however, no longer has the courage to face Cry, as he can't imagine what his next move might be. With that in mind, he decides to leave the Empire and orders his men to call Sophia back. Meanwhile, Cry attends a meeting with Gark and a government official who want him to reveal everything he knows about the Akasha Tower. Our protagonist then states clearly that he knows nothing and asks them to talk to Citri as she was in charge. Upon hearing Citri's name, the government official becomes nervous. 3 years ago, there was a major prison escape and all evidence pointed to Citri's involvement, which resulted in her demotion to level 2 and the loss of her title. However, Gark personally intervened to prove her innocence, and since then government officials have avoided her. The scene shifts to an improvised Akasha Tower base, where Magus's disciples capture and bring Sophia to him. The woman appears scared and asks what they plan to do with her. Magus tells her to stop pretending, but she insists that she isn't Sophia. At that moment, one of the flying lions arrives and shows hostility toward her, making Magus realize she is telling the truth. And then comes the plot twist. The real Sophia suddenly appears with a bottle of wine, leaving everyone confused. And friends, Tanya really was Tanya. Sophia, for her part, doesn't react to seeing her doppelganger and tells Magus that, in fact, the woman resembles Tanya. Despite the similarities, there are noticeable differences between them. She then removes her wig and robe, revealing herself to actually be Sitri. Everyone panics. Magus demands to know how she dares impersonate Sophia, and Sitri claims to be the same Sophia he knows. Everyone is shocked, thinking Sitri has betrayed them from the start. She explains that this isn't true and that she joined the Akasha Tower because she greatly admired Magus' work. She continues, saying she still deeply respects his curiosity and thirst for knowledge and helped him because she wanted to see the results of his research. However, she firmly states that it's now time to stop. Sitri tells Magus that the reason Cry let his men escape and took no action against them was actually a warning for her to stop and return. She assures him she revealed nothing but explains that Cry has the power to see through lies. She says everything was planned so they could test their research against high-level hunters, which was largely successful. She mentions that when the golem attacked Cry the previous night, she intervened to stop it because she didn't want the weapon to be destroyed. Sitri explains that the research has been confiscated and that everyone will be arrested, but she will continue her studies. Since the person called Sophia never existed, she will never be found, and all the blame will fall on Magus. She approaches her assistant and admits that, due to her red hair being too conspicuous, she used the assistant's appearance as a disguise. The girl begins to cry and faints as the Akasha Tower disciples try to attack Sitri. She commands the Flying Lion to help her, and everyone retreats. Magus, however, uses a powerful fire attack that incinerates the lion, but Sitri emerges unscathed, as she was prepared for this. She had found Sitri's slime, the one Cry lost, and it absorbed the attack to protect her. The slime then begins to devour the lion's body as Sitri explains that it is her best creation, capable of growing indefinitely by consuming mana. Magus panics, realizing the slime has the potential to devour the entire earth. And Sitri says she just wanted to test its performance against a powerful mage like him. Suddenly, Mega's disciples activate a smoke bomb and urge him to flee while they try to contain the golden slime. However, before his escape can be completed, Magus bumps into someone muscular at the door and tumbles down the stairs. He panics upon seeing him and Sitri appears, explaining that she wanted to become strong like her friends. Since creating golems is time-consuming and expensive, she decided to create a pet chimera. To do this, she broke into a maximum security prison and used the escaped criminals as raw material to create the chimera. Magus realizes he is facing the most ruthless person he has ever met, and Sitri puts on her mask, declaring that he will make excellent raw material for her. The chimera then finishes off Magus, and the others are arrested after Sitri erases their memories. She also erases her assistant's memories and reports to Cry that everything ended well. She says she will be more careful when handling materials next time, but he, as usual, has no idea what she's talking about. The scene then cuts to the Hunters Association, where they are holding a meeting about the incident with the Akasha Tower. At this moment, Cry asks the officers to hand over both the Akasha Golem and the Delight Eaters, which are actually the Malice Eaters, but he mistakes the name. The officers ask why he wants the Malice Eaters, and he innocently responds that it's for eating, leaving everyone shocked by his statement. Later, we find out that Cry managed to get the Malice Eaters, but wasn't able to obtain the Akasha Golem. He apologizes to Sitri for this, but she says it's fine and will go get the Malice Eaters while Cry waits in the lobby. At that moment, he meets Gark, who asks if he's heard of the Thunderous Lightning, explaining that it's a group that just arrived in the capital from Nebula Noobs, the Land of Mist. He adds that their leader, Arnold Hale, is a level 7 hunter, and Gark is surprised to realize that Cry doesn't know about them. Cry mentions that he simply isn't interested in them, and Gark reveals that Arnold is a dragon slayer who defeated the Thunder Dragon, but Cry reminds Gark that he too is a dragon slayer. Gark agrees and asks Cry not to cause trouble, patting him on the back playfully, but this gesture causes Cry to lose a safety ring. Gark then leaves, and Cry notices a poster announcing that the Zabrudian auction is coming up. He explains that it's a big national event held once a year, with most of the displayed items being rare relics. The quality and quantity of these relics are top tier, and Cry wants to go to the event, but at that moment he's as broke as a joke. He even thought about asking Sitri for a loan, but remembers that he recently repaid part of what he borrowed from her and still owes a lot of money, so he can't ask for more. Chloe then approaches him, and Cray remembers that she's Gark's niece, mentally noting that it's hard to believe they're related, since she's all cute and he's a big ogre. She asks if something happened, as she noticed her uncle was in a good mood, and Cry mentions that it might be because of the Dragon Slayer he mentioned. Chloe realizes he's talking about Arnold Hale from Falling Mist, and Citri appears and interrupts the conversation. Once again, Cry shows no interest in the group and leaves with Citri. On the way, he asks if she's carrying the Malice Eater in that bag and finds out that she is. They then pass by a peculiar group, and unbeknownst to them, it's the Falling Mist group. The group enters the Hunters Association, and the receptionist doesn't recognize them, which makes them think they're being underestimated, as if they're bumpkins. Meanwhile, the scene shifts, and we see Cry observing the little Malice Eater, thinking it's cute. Ava wonders if the creature will bite, but Citri reassures her that it's safe, as she taught the Malice Eater not to hurt her and Cry. The little creature then snuggles into Cry, and as it moves in his arms, it starts removing his safety rings one by one, making Cry wonder if it really isn't dangerous. He realizes the creature is just playing, but decides to hand it over to Citri, thinking that if he keeps holding it, he might end up playing until it's too late. He finds out that Citri named it Food, and wonders if she really plans to keep that name. She reminds him that he was the one who named it, and he thinks it was just an accident. He then thinks he'll need to recharge his relics before the creature decides to play with him again, and asks Citri when Lucia will be back. She informs him it'll take a while, as a powerful ghost swordsman appeared in the chief's office, and Luke, being a sword fanatic, decided to face him alone. Until he defeats him in a one-on-one duel, the group surely won't return. Cry wishes Lucia would come back alone, and Citri hands him a relic that allows him to store a spell inside. Cry thinks he already has one of those from Lucia and wonders why she's giving him another, but Citri doesn't explain and simply tells him to put it on his ring finger if he wants to. The scene then cuts to the Falling Mist group in a hotel, still annoyed about being underestimated by everyone in the city. One of the members says that there's no way around it, since they're outsiders, and they'll have to shut everyone up with their skills. The others agree, and Arnold is excited to prove his worth in the city. The scene changes again, and we see an inexplicable shift from 0 to 100, where Citri is giving Cry a very strange massage, and he tells her he'd like to recharge his relics. He reveals that there are several that need recharging, but no one but Lucia can recharge them all. Citri then says she'll handle it, and later we see her gathering the clan's mages. She informs them that today they'll learn a special technique suggested by Cry. She mentions they don't need to worry, as there's nothing like the usual 1,000 challenges, so they won't need to fear for their lives. She continues, saying that anyone who can learn it will become a mage on Lucia's level, and they're surprised to learn that Cry was able to develop such a promising training method. Citri asks if anyone volunteers, and they all start arguing, but no one steps forward. At this point, a group called Starlight, consisting of 2 mages named Lapis and Chris, steps up to the challenge. Chris immediately insults Cry, asking what's with the dead fish look he's giving. Lapis asks her to stop, saying that although Cry is unrefined, he is the clan's master, and in human society, they should follow the human rules. Chris backs off, but mentions that she can't believe this man is Lucia's older brother, as he's nothing like her. Cry then explains that the 2 figures there are semi-humans known as noble spirits, who live for a long time and are specialists in magic. We find out that Chris is level 3 and Lapis is level 6, and Cry mentions that noble spirits tend to give little credit to humans who aren't great mages. Lapis then asks Citri if she's sure that anyone can reach Lucia's level with this training, and Citri answers that this training is what made Lucia such an exceptional mage. Marietta, a member of the Obsidian Cross, decides to try the training, and Citri is happy with the decision, handing her a relic to recharge. However, even after trying for a while, Marietta can't recharge it, and Citri instructs her to keep trying. Marietta continues, and finally she manages to recharge the relic. But Citri doesn't stop there and hands her another one to charge. The cycle repeats until Marietta has used up all her mana and faints. Citri then explains that, generally people can increase their mana until their adolescence, but after that they can't expand their mana capacity. She then explains that when mana is overloaded, the person enters a stage of mana exhaustion, and this moment is an opportunity for those who have passed their growth phase to increase their mana capacity. She says that during mana recovery, a person can increase their mana limit by a few percent. Sven thinks this is the result of pushing the limits to the max, and Chris comments that even noble spirits take time to recover all their mana, so this method isn't very efficient. But Citri takes one of her strange potions and uses it to recover Marietta's mana in a second, also increasing her mana limit. She then explains that by repeating this process, it's possible to increase mana capacity and improve skills. Cry wonders if this was the method Lucia used to become so strong, and Lapis asks Citri if this was the training Lucia followed, and Citri confirms. However, the Starlight member seems suspicious. Citri then remembers that Starlight tried to recruit Lucia and taunts the group, saying Lucia isn't interested in joining them because they think too highly of themselves and neglect the training that others do to improve their skills. Citri's taunt works, and the noble spirits ask her to give them all her relics. Citri hands them a bag of relics, and as they participate in the training, the others join in as well. While they recharge the relics, Citri tells Cry that this should solve his problem, and Cry agrees. The scene then changes, and we see Ark talking to a noble who asks for his response to the offer made, and Ark declines, saying he still has much to learn. The noble realizes he's talking about Cry. The noble then says he'll wait for the right moment to make an exclusive deal with him. He then asks if Ark has met Count Gladys, informing him that he's looking for him, and it's at this moment that Eclair arrives. In yet another scene shift, we now see that Cry visited Liz and Tino asks him to wait since Liz is taking a bath. While waiting, Citri tries to recruit Tino as her disciple, saying she could easily make her stronger, but seeing how uncomfortable Tino is, Cry asks her to stop. Liz then asks Tino for the towel and leaves the bath, as Tino takes a little too long to hand it to her. Citri covers Cry's eyes before he sees something he shouldn't, and asks Liz to show some modesty, but Liz obviously has no idea what that means, so she just stays there, completely naked. Liz then asks Cry if he needs something, and he says he was waiting to celebrate her and Citri's return from the mission. Liz thinks he's very kind and tries to hug him, but Citri stops her because she's just in a towel. While the two sisters argue, Cry asks Tino to join them for the celebration, and she happily agrees. Later, we see the Falling Mist group looking for a bar in the city, while Cry, Citri, Tino, and Liz are having fun at one. Liz is already drunk after a drinking contest with Citri, but Citri is completely sober. Liz starts to think something's off, as it's not usual for her to get drunk so easily. And we find out she's right because Citri mixed something into Liz's drink. Tino knows what's going on but refuses to intervene in the sisters' fight for the sake of her own life. And they're served another round of drinks. Citri secretly adds something to the beer, just like before, and tells Liz they should continue the competition. However, this time Cry intervenes and hands the adulterated drink to Citri, making her hesitate. Liz quickly drinks her glass, but Citri continues hesitating, though she knows she can't back out, so she also drinks her glass. Soon we realize that both sisters are drunk and start complaining to Cry. Citri tells him that she knows he only sees her as a walking wallet, reminding him that he still owes her a 10-digit amount, and Cry promises to pay. She says he can always pay with his body, but Liz intervenes before Citri has a chance to put her hands on Cry. At this moment, the Falling Mist group enters the same bar, pushing some random people. They introduce themselves to everyone at the bar and brag about Arnold's level, the group leader. The drunk girls just look at them. Citri is already wondering if she could take them all down, while Cry, the master of not connecting the dots, wonders where he's heard that name before. The Falling Mist guys then mention they're after booze and women, and at this moment Liz arrives with some drinks, saying she has booze and women, asking if he wants to drink with a good woman, saying she'll give him special service. He just tells her to get out of there. And basically, that comment sealed his fate, as what happened next was a shower of drinks, followed by a huge mug to the head, while she shouted at the top of her lungs that she was going to beat them until nothing was left. One after the other, they fall from her blows. Arnold tries to get up, but Liz kicks him in the head and pins him to the ground, mentioning that the level 7 guy is ridiculously weak. The people at the bar, seeing that the situation is under control, celebrate and continue drinking, while a group there cheers for an idol who is basically imitating Tino's ending dance. Amazing. In a flashback, we now have a retrospective of 3 years to the day when Chloe, Gark's niece, took a test to join the first step. On that day, she faced Luke Psychol and, well, she unfortunately didn't have enough power to stand up to him. After failing this test, Chloe gave up on becoming a hunter and decided to work as a receptionist at the association. Back to the present day, a few hours after the incident at the bar, Cry remembers hearing about someone named Arnold before. Eva comments that this man has an incredible history, having defeated a thunder dragon, so it's crucial to handle this situation as peacefully as possible. And for that, the assistant plans to ask Gark to mediate the meeting. Cry agrees that this is a great idea and expresses that the Thunder Dragon with teriyaki sauce is delicious, as he remembers the day Citri made it for him, and he thought it was spectacular. Shocked, Eva reminds him that the body of such a dragon is made of rare and extremely expensive materials, but Cry asks her to stop lecturing him. Meanwhile, Arnold confesses that the girl who hit him is strong, acknowledging that she is probably a well-known hunter in this capital, but no matter what, he swears she will regret tarnishing the reputation of Thunderstrike. Later, he and his allies head to the association's reception to find out the name of his assailant. At that moment, Gark arrives and explains that they are basically dealing with the Broken Shadow and that her name is Liz Smart. Changing the subject, the branch chief mentions that Thunderstrike caused problems as soon as he arrived in the city, and that he had to warn Liz's guardian about a possible revenge against her, although it's likely that this guardian has already forgotten about the feud. Coincidentally, he was also at the bar and is considered a very laid-back guy, mentioning that his name is Cry Andre, an 8th level hunter known as the Thousand Tricks. Arnold's men are horrified to hear that our protagonist is an 8th level hunter, but Gark tells them to relax, as Cry is not the type to let the weaker ones be mistreated. So if Arnold and his team promise to behave, he won't let Liz lay a hand on them again. Speaking of which, Gark pulls out a written request Cry made for the visitors. The letter said, "It's really tasty with teriyaki sauce, so please bring some Thunder Dragon meat." Seeing Arnold flipping out in rage for being humiliated this way, Gark advises him to either accept the request or not, and walks away without saying anything more. With that said, Arnold declares that his new enemy is the Thousand Tricks. In the meantime, upon discovering that Cry's debt to Citri has surpassed 10 digits, Ava asks the guy if he knows exactly what that represents. Counting on his fingers, our protagonist assures her that he knows, though he doesn't seem very confident in his math skills. Discouraged, the assistant informs him that the amount is around 10 billion, and she wants to know what Citri thinks about all of this. Cry explains that she proposed 3 options. In the first one, he could simply throw the alchemist in prison and default on the payment, delay the payment until legal measures take effect. But Citri would be very lonely in prison, so if Cry decides to do this, she asks that her sister be imprisoned with her. The second option is that Citri becomes his wife, because being married, their possessions would be mutual, nullifying the debt. The third and final option is that Cry becomes engaged to the girl, which for him is almost the same thing, and Cry, half-jokingly and very much in trouble, simply declares that marriage might be an option, mentioning that he's not going to do that, and that he will try to pay in the proper way. Eva thinks that this will be possible with the Strange Grief recipe, as long as he doesn't waste money. But she suggests that if he wants to pay off the debt faster, he could venture into a treasure vault to make some extra money. Seeing the dissatisfaction on his face, the woman says she will come up with a payment plan for the boss, but asks him not to incur any more debts. Soon after being left alone, Cry becomes even more discouraged as he remembers that the auction is approaching. At the same time, on the street, Tino hears a man telling Arnold's companions about the Thousand Tricks' ability to see the future. After that, a woman comments that Cry reached level 8 without making any mistakes. Tino doesn't waste time and enters the conversation just to say that his master is absolutely amazing. Afterward, she walks away as if nothing had happened, leaving the guys perplexed. Shortly after, they return to the boss to report that no matter how much they ask people, all they hear about the Thousand Tricks are vague stories that reinforce the myth that this guy is a great mystery. What they've discovered is that Cry rarely accepts missions and leaves everything to his friends. They even say that the leader of Strange Grief knew about a treasure vault that simply appeared before everyone. On another occasion, they claim he isolated a giant golem using only the power of his mind. Arnold finds these stories ridiculous and fabricated, but he can't ignore the fact that Cry is indeed level 8. So he believes he might have never faced someone who represented a real threat. Arnold's partners also mention that, from what they've heard, almost no one has seen the Thousand Tricks in action during a fight. Based on this, Thunderstrike concludes that the enemy is more of a strategist, having reached level 8 with the help of the Broken Shadow and his other allies. This obviously doesn't mean that Cry is weak, but he believes that he has no chance against a level 7 who reached that level with his own effort, just like he did. With this thought in mind, the hunter promises to show this imperial capital that they are not just a bunch of country bumpkins like the city thinks. The scene shifts, and we see Cry losing his mind over the astronomical debt he owes to Citri. To forget the stress, he decides to breathe a bit on the balcony when Tino suddenly shows up asking if the master needs anything. He mentions that he's fine, and she says she is too, but as she passed by, she looked up at the sky and saw Cry smiling at her, which led her to stop by. Cry mentally notes that he hadn't even seen her, but takes the opportunity to make a request. After sitting down to talk with the girl, she seems uncomfortable with what she hears, and awkwardly confesses that she needs to cover the cost of repairing her equipment, so there's a limit to how much she can help. Cry replies that he isn't asking for a loan, especially since his debt has already surpassed 10 digits. Trying to understand the value, Tino starts counting on her fingers, but ends up bleeding from her mouth when she realizes that Cry is indebted to the point of having nothing left. Things get worse when he suggests that the debt could be annulled by marrying Citri, which is more than enough to destabilize the poor girl. To lighten the mood, Cry invites Tino to get some sweets on the street, but she remains worried about his debt and suggests they look for treasure vaults to sell relics at the next auction. However, Cry knows he's not up for that task. After all, if he was, he wouldn't have accumulated such a huge debt in the first place. Tino then mentions that if he doesn't want to go, she can do it for him, as long as the place isn't too dangerous. Meanwhile, one of Arnold's allies, also walking down the street, comments that even if they wanted to defeat the 1,000 Tricks, they couldn't confront his clan directly, and that it would be better to wait for an opportunity to catch him alone. And well, as life is full of coincidences, we soon see that right after this conversation, they run into Cry and Tino. Although it takes a moment for Cry to recognize who these men are, they don't seem friendly as they draw their weapons. With Tino protecting her master, our protagonist mentions that the slap he received from Liz that day was powerful, but explains that he's currently in a meeting with Tino and doesn't want to start a fight, even mentioning that if necessary, he could apologize. However, Tino doesn't accept her master's attitude and gets furious, calling the outsiders country bumpkins, destroying any chance of peacefully resolving the conflict. As a result, Cry invites the opponents to a more courageous confrontation in front of numerous spectators. His plan here is that a clan member would appear by coincidence, but so far, it's just him and Tino fighting, along with Arnold and his 5 lackeys, whom he nicknames A to E, just to stay organized. When one of them asks when the fight will start, our protagonist tells A to be patient. And as this anime is full of coincidences, well, here's another one. That was the guy's actual name, so everyone starts thinking that Cry is trying to mess with their minds, as it would be impossible for him to know this. Irritated, Arnold declares that Cry only got to where he is because of his friends. Enraged, Tino screams that she'll handle the fight right now. At this moment, Cry steps back and says she's free to act. Tino then pauses to think and realizes that maybe she had overestimated her ability to defeat everyone alone. But still, there's no turning back, so now she has to hold her ground. With no other choice, Tino charges at Arnold, but her strikes aren't strong enough to damage him, as he easily blocks each attack. Meanwhile, Cry continues looking around, hoping that someone from the clan would show up. The fight starts to heat up when Tino manages to land a kick that slips past Arnold's guard. Losing patience, the outsider throws her to the ground and directly challenges Cry. At that moment, our 1,000 Tricks pulls out a powerful relic that holds a spell capable of subduing high-level hunters without harming anyone. He explains that he asked his sister Lucia to create an item with this power, and that's how he obtained the artifact. Paralyzed and desperate, Arnold demands to know what it is, and Cry responds that it's the tyrannical authority, an original gravity magic. With his rival subdued, our protagonist proposes a condition. Arnold would only get another chance to fight him if he could defeat the main groups of the first steps, namely Obsidian Cross, Starlight, and Arc Brave. And after the fight ends, Tino apologizes for her poor performance in the battle and promises to do everything she can to help her master pay off the debt. Hours later, during Liz's training, Citri tells her that Arnold had attacked Cry and that Tino tried to resolve the situation. But in the end, Cry had to use the tyrannical authority to end everything. Liz comments that she would love to put Arnold in his place, but she feels she shouldn't do anything without Cry's approval. Meanwhile, Chloe meets with Cry to deliver a new message addressed to Arnold and his gang. She mentions that the guys are level 7 hunters known for having defeated a dragon. She reminds him that Cry provoked them by asking them to hunt another thunder dragon for teriyaki. In his defense, Cry mentions that it's not his fault that the dragon tastes so delicious like that. He then comments that, in fact, the message he wanted to send was, "I'll never forget you until I no longer remember you." Chloe says she found the message a bit confusing, but she wrote it down anyway. Before Cry leaves, she asks what he thinks she was missing to pass the test 3 years ago. He says that the girl knows the answer, and that she would surely pass if she tried again. Later, alone, Cry replays his thoughts until he remembers the real reason Chloe didn't pass the test, mentioning that at the time, she was only 14 years old, 1 year below the minimum age required to be admitted. He mentions that, however, if he tried to recruit her now, Gark would certainly beat him up. Meanwhile, the scene shifts, and we see it from Chloe's perspective. She promised to find the answer to the riddle Cry mentioned earlier. She says that although she doesn't know exactly what to do, she decided to focus on her work as a receptionist at the guild, and in this way, continue to evolve. The episode ends, and now we wait to see how the next showdown between Cry and Arnold will unfold.